Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. Whatever time you're watching Orange First, welcome to the show. I'm Lionel Bienvenu. In this case, Orange First is not the first show to look ahead to the next game. We're looking ahead to the next head coach of the Denver Broncos. With me, as always, our Denver 7 Broncos insider, Troy Rink, and the most interesting man in the sports world, Woody Page, and his glorious... Is that leather, Woody?
Of course
leather
it's
or
leather.
plastic?
How dare you ask that?
Jacket. Well, it looks like, well,
After the show, I'm going to cut off.
It looks good on you, for sure.
After the show, I'm going to cut this arm off and make a glove.
Yeah.
First baseman's glove.
All right, guys, let us start this off with the Pump the Brakes segment with Brakes Plus. Right off the bat, because we're not looking back at the last game. We're looking back at a 9-7 season, a season that they missed the playoffs, beat the Raiders in the last game, and lost their head coach as Gary Kubiak stepped down on Monday, Troy.
Yeah, that wasn't a surprise. It wasn't a shock, but it was a surprise. Gary Kubiak won a Super Bowl in his first year, second year disappointing. The irony is that if they had played in this last game, they had played that way against Tennessee or Kansas City, they were going to the playoffs. And Gary Kubiak said earlier in the week that it would not have changed his mind. I still think it might have if they go make a deep playoff run.
Right.
Regardless, disappointing finish. And for me, Lionel, it starts with two things. They couldn't stop the run, and they didn't run well. They went from 83 yards allowed rushing to 130. They went from running for 107 yards a game all the way down to 92. Those were the telling stats because they were not consistently winning the battle at the line of scrimmage.
People talk about defenses winning championships. It really starts at the line on both sides.
Yeah.
And so when you talk about the defense,
The game is won in the trenches.
And the Broncos have an incredible pass rush, and they have an incredible backstop.
Yeah, no fly zone.
But the problem is that they had injury problems with Brandon Marshall at linebacker, and they needed one heftier linebacker, and they needed Vance Johnson. I'm sorry,
Vance Walker.
Vance Walker. They need Vance Johnson. But that was my other point. You saw it on Sunday. Where have you been, Cody Latimer? Hireman. Where you just showed up for practice? I mean, there were guys coming out of the woodwork if they had played like that during the course of the season. Yeah, Booker. I mean, what it was showing to me. That, I think, when you look at that, you go, where were you guys all season if they could have gotten that sort of support out of them? And I thought that Trevor Siemian played more. He's not a high-energy guy, but he played more relaxed. It looked like that to me. But I had picked them 10-6, and I think that they finished about where they were going to be. They were not going to go back and win the Super Bowl. There are too many pieces missing from last year and not enough new people to really help them get over the hump to get back there.
So Gary Kubiak steps down, emotional tribute to his wife, to his 3 boys, and to John Elway as he retired. 22 years in the organization, and now there's a huge void to fill. And John said there's 3 or 4, in his words, potential young candidates out there that are intriguing. And Woody, you wrote a great column on the denverchannel.com on Kyle Shanahan. The Broncos have requested to talk to Kyle Shanahan, the son of Mike. They probably will go to Atlanta this week and meet with him. And
between Friday and Saturday,
situation, isn't it?
I think that the intriguing aspect of it is because Mike Shanahan was still the most successful from a winning percentage standpoint, that because of the strain, I'll put it that way, between Joe Ellis, John Elway, and Mike Shanahan, some concerns would be about if we're bringing in Kyle Shanahan, are we bringing Mike Shanahan into the fold? And what I've been told by people very close to the situation is that Kyle is going to inform them that his father will not be part of it. He won't be part of game planning or he won't be obviously with the staff, but he would not be a guy any more than Kubiak, who spent most of his adult career with Mike Shanahan, winning 4 Super Bowls. I think that's one thing we got to remind people about Kubiak, because I've seen it wrong, but they won a Super Bowl title as assistant coaches in San Francisco. They won 2 here together, and then Kubiak won a 4th. And you think about how many guys as coaches, assistant or head coaches, that have won 4 Super Bowls. So it's going to be, I thought John Elway basically gave away what his game plan was. Young, bright, creative, in the playoffs, because he kept saying, we're going to
Gotta
work
make
it
it happen
out.
fast.
So,
That
I
includes
mean,
Vance Joseph,
you
right?
saw
I mean-
people dropping off the list every time he said bright. I went, well, that eliminates two guys. I know.
Eliminated 2 sports writers right here. Oh, dang it.
So I think we've narrowed it down to a young coordinator that is in the playoffs. And so that's, 6 or 7 possible candidates. And
Yeah,
he
Vance
said 3 or
Joseph
4.
would be one. They will interview him. They interviewed
Right.
him a couple years ago
Yeah.
for the head coaching job. At that point, offered him the defensive coordinator job. Cincinnati wouldn't let him go, then gave him the D coordinator job in Cincinnati to keep him from Denver. Then he ended up in Miami as D coordinator.
Right.
But they were impressed by him. Darrell Bevel, the coordinator of the Seahawks, would be in that mix. Terrell Austin.
He's a little older, though.
Yeah, he's not as young.
He's in his late 40s, and I don't know whether you consider that young. I do, but
Yeah.
I don't know whether Elway
That's young
does.
to me.
Terrell Austin from Detroit would be in
Right.
that mix. Anthony Lynn, who, though, he's clearly the front runner in Buffalo if he wants that job. He's a former Bronco.
Right.
But Woody's right. He really showed you, like, I want a young offense. I want either young offensive mind, young defensive mind. So that Mike McCoy out.
Yeah.
Oh,
These people floating the idea of Tom Coughlin for your out.
Rashad Payton or
Yeah.
the former St. Louis Rams coach that's the coordinator down in Dallas Cowboys.
Oh, Linehan.
Yeah, I think that
I don't
eliminates
think
him.
he-
I started looking at people's ages. I started looking at who was in the playoffs, and he narrowed it down in the list as, I would say, no, he said 3 or 4. I think the list would be no longer than 5 or 6.
I'll ask you this, Lionel. Is it the most attractive job, or is it the most difficult job? The last 2 coaches won either a Super Bowl or division title, and the
Right.
job either wore them out physically or
Yeah.
they got run out of town.
Well-
How do you see it?
Well, if you listen to NFL executives, they say it's the most desirable job because of what you might have in place here. But here's the thing. John Elway said it on Monday. He said Gary Kubiak came in here. The expectations were high. They had
Right.
just come off a Super Bowl in 2014.
You
so
guys-
the expectations here.
Championship or bust.
Right.
That's what it feels like.
But
It's
you
becoming the Yankees. I kind of like it, but this is a difficult place to work because of the expectations.
You're having a conversation that you shouldn't even go down that line. I mean, if you're a coach, to have an organization, even with Pat Bowlen basically out of the picture, with John Elway running it, an organization that is gone. I counted them up. If you count the interim coach when Josh was fired, they've had 9 coaches in all the time I've been here, and before that. In over 40 years, 8 real coaches and an interim coach.
Right.
That's some security. I mean, Buffalo's gone through that many since Wade Phillips got in the playoffs there.
Right.
So you got to take that. You got the talent on one side of the ball,
Right.
so you got to develop it on the other side. You've got a fan base. You've got a team that has had championship glory. Why in the world would you want to go to Jacksonville where there's no history except for the one upset over the Broncos? You don't want to go to Buffalo. Who wants to? No offense to people in Buffalo, but who really wants to live there and work there? And a team
Right.
that hasn't had any success. So I'm saying this is by far the most attractive job unless you just want to live in Los Angeles.
The most attractive job with the highest expectations of any franchise that has a job opening right now.
Absolutely.
All right, let's do some business. The Xfinity X1 injury report real quick, and then we'll talk Elway and quarterbacks. So, Troy, they got guys in the offseason. DeMarcus Ware recovering from surgery. Matt Paradis is going to have surgery. There's some guys that are dinged up. They're going to have an offseason of rehab coming up.
Yeah, DeMarcus Ware, we're not sure if he comes back. He's a free agent. He had a disc repaired in his back.
Right.
We'll see. Shane Ray blossoms. I'm not sure if Ware will be back. If he is, it's going to be on a much lower salary.
Right.
You look at Matt Paradis, surgery on both hips.
Yikes.
He wouldn't tell me exactly what it is. I think it's labrum related based on the doctor he's using in Vail.
Right.
But he said he'll be ready for the season, but that bears watching because he was by far their best lineman.
Yeah.
Brandon Marshall's hamstring will heal. I talked to Andy Janovich today.
Yeah.
He is healing. He had the broken ankle.
Yep.
He's healing on schedule, but he may not be back. If the next coach doesn't want a fullback,
Yeah, who knows?
if it's Kyle Shanahan, I like his chances. If it's not Kyle, we might not see Manovich again. But those, where you look at is a major one, but we're not sure he would be back. But the quarterback question was the fascinating one today for me,
Right.
Lionel. When you look at, when you're the coach coming in, my question if I'm John Elway is, what is your plan to develop these quarterbacks? More specifically, Paxton Lynch.
Right.
So I think Simeon, you could fit into most systems. He said, he feels good about the situation, much better than he did in March after Brock left. not maybe as good as they did when they had Peyton, obviously. And he asked, what about a veteran? And he's like, well, I never say never, but I'm comfortable now. What do you think, Woody? Will John lose his patience, come March and say, this has been great, but boom, the window's open.
Does Paxton Lynch fit in the Kyle Shanahan offense?
It's this Kyle Shanahan offense. Matt Ryan does.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I think you have to lean toward Kyle Shanahan, because he's been able to adopt to different quarterbacks.
Johnny Manziel.
RG3, Johnny
RG3.
Manziel. I mean, you think about it. In Houston, when he was the youngest coordinator in the NFL, he was 31, something like that, younger than he's 3 years younger than Josh McDaniels. He helped turn Schwab into one of the best quarterbacks.
Schaub, you're right.
Yeah, the paint job guy. No, but Schaub was a guy that was number 2, number 3 in the league in statistics. So
one year he led it in passing, but you're right. He turned him around.
I don't think I came up with this, but he's a quarterback whisperer like Adam Gase. And I think that John looked back on it, even though I don't think they would have gotten to the Super Bowl last year, because I think bringing in Wade Phillips was the final piece to that. But Adam Gase, in the long term, would have been a better coach for them, knowing what we know now and look at what Gary Kubiak. But I think that Kyle Shanahan is that kind of guy, that he's a quarterback whisperer, that he can come in and work with both these quarterbacks and make them good quarterbacks.
I mean, Lynch, Matt Ryan's talked about how he learned from Shanahan how to be more mobile. Like, you look at Matt Ryan this year compared to the previous 2 years, he was trending this way. The Matty Ice jokes where, Matty frozen, Matty, I mean, he was terrible.
Mud puddle.
Mud puddle Matty. I mean, you look at him now, he's an MVP guy. They averaged 33.5 points.
Yep.
There isn't another team in the NFL.
league.
No other team in the NFL, Woody, is at 30. They're 4 points higher than any team in the league. That's impressive. That forces you to take notice.
Yeah.
And Kyle Shanahan is in control of that offense. It isn't one of these who's calling the play. Dan Quinn is a defensive guy, the coach of the Falcons.
Maybe I was trying to read into it, but to talk about some other positions very quickly that John Elway, I also thought, revealed a lot about, we got to fix the offensive line again.
Absolutely.
That he brought that up, and he didn't leave out the defense. And I think I'm reading into it, but I think he's talking about they got to get some bulk up front. They got to get somebody in the middle. They got to get somebody on the end, and they got to get a little bit more weight and a little more power out of a linebacker. Right. So I think he's still going to use his draft choice and get 1 or 2 key free agents on defense. So I thought he was very revealing today.
Right. Well, Woody had the great column on the DenverChannel.com on Kyle Shanahan and his connections. I mean, Elway, Kubiak, and Shanahan, those three, and now we're back to another Shanahan. That would be crazy. You've got something about Wade Phillips. Obviously, his contract is coming up.
Right.
John Elway didn't say anything about Wade or his future. In the presser.
Well, he's not going to be the head coach.
Because, but
he said no.
To me, it would be, Woody and I talked about this before, if you want to keep son of bum, then you sign him. John Elway signed and said, hey, whoever comes in, Wade Phillips is your defensive coordinator. He's here. But that's not happened yet, Troy.
Well, again, there was growing feeling last week that even if Kubiak had stayed, that Wade might have been out.
Yikes.
It's so hard for me to believe. That's more shocking than Kubiak.
And the guy to keep an eye on if Wade's out, and I hope he's back for selfish reasons, because he's the great quote and he's funny and he's just remarkable to be around and he's good at his job. And if you brought in Kyle Shanahan, you could make the argument, young head coach. Here's this guy who's 70, who's done it it would be his 47th year of coaching.
And that's
more than Kyle Shanahan's been on this earth. So that would be, but again, it seems to be trending the other way with Wade not coming back.
Wow.
And Joe Woods would be the guy to keep an eye on staff, the defensive back coach of the no-fly zone. If Wade moved on or signed somewhere else, would they go to Joe Woods as the D coordinator?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of plates in the air, and some of it does depend on the coach. But Wade Phillips might get tired of waiting and say, you know what, I'm going to get an offer somewhere else.
He won't have trouble getting a job.
And I'll tell you where I think he ends up. I think Peyton stays in, I'm not talking Manning, Sean Payton stays in New Orleans. And I think he would hire Wade Phillips, who was there under his father.
Connections
he was
under
coach there.
Phillips,
and it's close enough to Texas that he can have his fun about Texas people.
All right, Woody, you got a rant for us this week?
Sure, it has to do with all we're talking about. I thought one of the most amazing things I saw today was that Kubiak said goodbye And I thought it was very classy the way he handled it. It wasn't a speech prepared. He knew what he was going to say. But he did it, and there was a lot of emotion and everything. That should have been the end of it. I don't know what they were thinking out there, and I'm going to point to John Elway. I'm going to talk to Patrick Smythe got all the attention. That should have been another day. This day should have been about Gary Kubiak. But yet what happened is now everybody's saying all these nice things, getting ready to say on talk radio, there. Everybody's concentrating on Gary leaving and what he meant to the community and what we talked about on the show on Sunday night, that he was one of the best coaches in the history of Colorado, in every sport you talk about. And yet, here's John back up there, and the attention just goes to who the next.
Who are you going to replace Gary? Who's going to replace Gary?
My rant, and it's not real loud today, was that was a tragic mistake as far as I'm concerned. That could have been tomorrow or Wednesday. Today is the attention on Monday should have been about Gary Kubiak and his legacy here and what he accomplished, as you brought up. 24 victories, that's more than anybody's accomplished in the first 2 years in Denver. What he meant to this franchise as a backup player, as an assistant coach, as a head coach, as a guy in the community, as a guy who never once in his career caused any problems to anybody.
Drew attention to himself.
Right. And so to didn't just sort of, forgive me, mess all over that by coming in and saying, okay, he's out the door. And the odd thing, and I'll end with it, is as he walked out the door, all the assistant coaches walked out with him. And that was kind of ironic in its own way because they may be doing that.
Yeah, you're right.
But that was a mistake, Broncos.
All right, well, the off-season officially began today, which there is no off-season, obviously. So the search for a head coach, we start with Kyle Shanahan. Already set up a meeting. Already requested to talk to him, so we'll see where that goes. Hey, that's Woody Page. Check out woodypage.com. Watch him on ESPN. Pardon the interruption.
Close enough.
Around the horn.
Around the horn.
TheDenverChannel.com.
You should be on all of them.
Gazette.com.
Right.
I have a podcast starting with Jay Mariotti this week.
Oh, nice.
Called
Fantastic.
Unmuted. First time we'll be unmuted.
And then follow Troy at Troy Rink on Twitter and TheDenverChannel.com. All the latest on the search. So until next time, until we meet again, that's it for Orange First. We'll see you later. Have a great 2017.